Morning, members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those viewing via social media, and members of the media. Welcome to Central Committee number 5 of today, Friday, October 28, 2022. I would like to give a special welcome to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Artwell Irian, and his support staff, and a special welcome as well to the representatives of Still Beautiful Foundation. We have established a quorum of 9 members. At this time, I invite you to please stand for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. I have not received any notice of absence from members, and at this time I open the agenda point notifications, and I would like to open by stating that as Parliament ends the week of breast cancer awareness under the theme of Parliament Goes Pink, I would like to thank all members of Parliament and staff who have submitted the names of individuals whom we have lost from the battle of breast cancer and the names of breast cancer survivors and warriors. These names were announced during the meetings of the past week, and I would also like to thank all members of Parliament and staff who have cooperated and wore pink or a hint of pink during the past week and have participated in the picture moments. We have, as we close off today, and as mentioned before, we have announced the names of persons, and I would like to repeat those briefly today. Under the survivors, we have received names of Ms. Glenda Brady. We have also received a listing of names by first names, and they know who they are, and some of us know who they are as well, just by their first name. And they include Jenny, Juliet, Pam, Loretta, Maso, Charlotte, Dawn, Julie, Yolanda Jackson, and there was also a message received from someone who had passed, and that came from the sister of Patricia Bowers. And under the other members who have passed as well, or breast cancer patients who have passed, we have Diane Hodge, Catherine Bryson, Mavis Brooks Salmon, and the list ends there. Of course, there are dozens more survivors among us, and there are dozens more who have passed on as well. And we express again our deepest condolences to the members, the family members, to those who have passed, but we also embrace those who are still among us and carrying on the battle as survivors and carrying on the torch. Today, as one of the activities closing of this week of breast cancer awareness, which was October 24th through 28th, in Parliament, we have present with us this morning representatives of the Still Beautiful Foundation, who have been invited to share with Parliament and the general public information on the foundation and what the foundation has been doing to bring awareness surrounding breast cancer here on St. Martin. The time allotted is 5 minutes, and at this time I would like to give the floor to Ms. Marcelina Loblack, founder of the Still Beautiful Foundation, Maso, as she is better known as. You have the floor.
Good morning, President of Parliament, Rafir, members of Parliament, the Honorable Minister of Finance and his support staff, TV, televiewers, my board members, a pleasant good morning, and thank you for having us here today. The Still Beautiful Foundation was founded back in September of 2014. The reason behind the forming of the foundation started when my journey started back in 2012. My best friend at the time encouraged me to form this foundation in order to give back the support to other breast cancer survivors, their family, and their support team. Back when I was diagnosed, I had a strong support team that called Team Muscle. From Team Muscle, we had supporters that did the cooking, the cleaning, the washing, taking me to the doctor, doing grocery shopping, even taking care of my kids. And from that, we decided, why not form the foundation and give back to other survivors like myself? Being diagnosed with breast cancer, it's not an easy road. It's not an easy journey. And your support staff, your support team is the ones that get you through that journey every day. And they themselves need that support as well. So forming the Still Beautiful Foundation, we've give back. We've give back to breast cancer survivors, their family, and their support staff via counseling, whether it may be a one-on-one with me personally or my team. We also support their children if they have any, as well as their family members and team, because as a community, we can do this together. I know of many breast cancer survivors that did it alone, and it's not a journey to be done alone. It's a journey that you need to have a good support team. As Still Beautiful in the awareness part, we also does our events during the month of October. This year, like the 2 previous years, we hosted Play for Cure softball tournament. That tournament encourages teams to play for a cause. From the funding raised from that, we give back to the community. This year, we decided to do it with a little twist. Each team had to play for a survivor. 10 survivors. And if you know survivors, you know some of them are very shy in telling their story. They prefer to be private about it. This year, the 10 survivors came out strong. They put a face to breast cancer. They showed the world that breast cancer is no longer a death sentence. With the support of Still Beautiful, giving them that secure blanket to get through the journey, they was able to give back and continue to give back to the community. Still Beautiful not only support the survivors and their support team, we also donate to the hospital, the White and Yellow Cross, and anyone out there, once the funds is available, because we are a non-profit organization, so we depend on donations only, in order to give back. The hospital, for example, we were able to donate blankets. If those that you know who supported breast cancer patients when they're doing chemo, it can be cold at times, so we donate blankets to the hospital, also to the White and Yellow Cross. We also donated this year the survival bell. Those of you that watch TV and know of in the US and all over the world, they have the bell. At the end of your last chemo treatment, you ring that bell. That bell shows that you have conquered it. You have survived it. And you are still here. This year, we are planning again to do another donation to the hospital. And whatever they need in order for the oncologist department to provide the proper care and support to breast cancer survivors out there. Anyone doing chemo, no matter of fact. Just like the Yellow and White Cross, we also donate to them in order to help the elderly that may be diagnosed with breast cancer as well while in the home. This year, I want to thank a special thank you to my team. Without them, it wouldn't have been possible. We are 12 strong, starting with the president, Ms. Judianne Hoover-Labega, the vice president, Ms. Shanae Hodge, the secretary who's here with us today, Ms. Paula Gordon, the treasurer, Ms. Cheryl Ponteflet, our marketing team, Mr. Kenrick Housen and Ms. Gina Illage, along with Mr. Selby Phillips, Ms. Kiana Lambert, Ms. Vanessa Williams, Wilson, sorry, and Ms. Suleika Seboni. We have a dynamic team here that gives back. I am the founder of the foundation, yes, but without these fellows and ladies, we would not be able to give back to the community. When I can't make it to the counseling, any one of them steps up to the plate. Because like I said, we give that support. We might not be the public face out there, but we're the ones behind the scene. We're the ones telling survivors, like our logo says and our team says, still beautiful, before, during, and beyond. Because before breast cancer, you were beautiful. During that whole process and that ordeal, you are still beautiful. And beyond breast cancer, you will remain to be beautiful. So today I ask members of parliament, viewers, support, encourage, because breast cancer is no longer a death sentence. And that's still beautiful. That's what we're trying to promote out there each and every day. We do not wait until October to promote awareness. We do not wait until October to give support. And the only way we can continue to give the support, especially to the hospital and those centers that in need, is via funding, donations. We doesn't charge. I doesn't charge. My board members doesn't charge when we does our counseling. We do it free of charge. For the simple fact, like I said, when I was diagnosed, it was given to me free of charge. So why should I charge to give back that same support to other women and men? Because men do get breast cancer as well. That support helps close that gap. That support that we give, if that journey helps them through that process. And like I always say, it's easy to get support out there from others encouraging you. But when you get it from someone that walked that walk, not once, but twice, because I am a 2-time breast cancer survivor of stage 3 triple negative. And I will continue, along with my team, to guide and support any and every man, woman, or child out there that's being diagnosed with breast cancer. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Loblack, known to all of us as Maso. At this time, I open the floor to members of parliament. Are there any notifications? MP Heilige Martin, you have the floor.
Good morning, members of parliament. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the Secretary General and the Minister of Finance and his support staff. Good morning to Still Beautiful and her team, Maso. Beautiful presentation. Good morning, St. Martin. In lieu of the closing of the Parliament Goes Pink campaign, I'd like to make a short statement. And as many of you are aware, facing breast cancer is a life-altering experience for most breast cancer survivors. And on their journey through cancer, they often learn about strength and optimism. And most women share their experience and inspire others, like Masu does today. To the breast cancer warriors and survivors, I say unto you, every woman's success for overcoming breast cancer should be an inspiration to another. We are strongest when we cheer each other on. On a sad note, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to Ms. Brenda Maynard and the rest of her family with the passing of her stepfather, Mr. Peter Maynard. May his soul rest in eternal peace. And lastly, I would like to inform everyone formally that yesterday I tendered my resignation from the UP Party, making it the 9th candidate to have officially or non-officially leave the party thus far. This is the amount of candidates that ran on the UP slate during the 2020 election. And also 3 of the 5 official members to have left the party thus far. And based on this and based on the articles of incorporations of the UP Party, it means that UP Party legally has no board member or no board. This also means that I also do not support the Jacobs 2 cabinet anymore, now that I'm independent. And what it also means that the Jacobs 2 cabinet now has 2 members of parliament, 4 National Alliance parliament supported by 1 USP faction and 1 independent faction, making it 8. So for clarity's sake, they still have 8 members supporting the government under the Jacobs 2 cabinet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Heiliger Martin. MP Solange Duncan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning to the SG, my colleagues. Good morning to the minister and his support staff. And a good morning to the Still Beautiful Foundation and the people of St. Martin. I also want to join my colleague first in extending condolences to our colleague here at Parliament, Ms. Brenda Maynard, wishing her family much strength during this time. And I would just like to thank the Still Beautiful Foundation for the work that they have done. Publicly, I share the fact that, the last 2 years for me has been extremely difficult with my older sister and friend surviving breast cancer. It was the first time I experienced it. And for me, these foundations have done decades worth of work in the community, and nonprofits, in my opinion, really are the engine on St. Martin when it comes to supporting victims or families, survivors, warriors. And so I'd just like to thank the foundation for the work that they are doing, and wish them continued success. And to all the survivors out there and to all of the families, continued strength and comfort. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Solange Duncan. And the next speaker, MP Bescott Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and a good morning to you and our Secretary General. A good morning to my colleagues. A good morning to the Minister and his support staff who's here for the agenda point for this meeting. And of course, a good morning to Maso and her other team members of the Still Beautiful Foundation. I want to thank the foundation, Still Beautiful, for representing the cause here this morning in Parliament. You did a wonderful job in recognizing, of course, your own work, which is important, has been important for many years, but in doing so, also recognize any awareness initiatives that are out there and support that is out there. I want to say a special word of thanks as well to our own Secretariat, the Secretariat of Parliament, for when I ask about doing something in addition to wearing pink during the month of October, in addition to what the individual members of Parliament have been doing and are doing, to do something to show as a collective body our concern, appreciation, and the like for all, one, who have survived breast cancer, for those persons who have succumbed to breast cancer and their families, and just by making sure that the message remains out there, as it was so eloquently put, that breast cancer does not have to be a death sentence. It does not have to be. And I don't think the time is now, but I will share my own personal story at some point. But I believe today the focus should be on so many others out there who have survived, who have fought. But what I would want to mention in this context is my late mother, who for decades was a cancer survivor. And when she passed at the age of 94 years, it was not because of that. And if her operation at the time, and I'm talking now, I guess, early 60s, was able to save and allow her to live a very, very fruitful life, hardworking until God took her. I think that should tell us that with technology and information and communication today, we should not have to lose anyone to breast cancer. So thank you to the foundation and other foundations out there. Thank you to our secretariat. You have done a wonderful job in helping Parliament also be that face out there. And Mr. Chairman, it would be amiss of me if I was not to repeat a call that I have been making to especially our Minister and Ministry of Health for a type of mandatory screening for illnesses of which we think that by having that mandatory screening, it will help many persons, it will prevent many illnesses from taking hold in persons. And so I just want to repeat it. And as with so many things, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It happens in the Netherlands, for example, but it also happens right on French St. Martin, where I was reminded just this morning of persons receiving letters to remind them of coming to take their what is considered a mandatory test or screening. So, Mr. Chairman, I am extremely grateful for the events that we have had this week. As you know, during the month of October, I myself have Pink 10 SXM, 10 days of wearing, showing something pink, and started on the 20th of October, and we do 10, it actually comes out to 11 days. So, and I also want to thank my colleagues who have kind of joined me in that. And again, thanks to all who keep the torch lit where awareness and assistance and support are concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. And the next MP to take the floor, MP George Pontiflet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the chair, my colleagues in Parliament, our Honorable Minister of Finance and his support staff. Of course, still beautiful. Mr. Chairman, I believe that the words of, as you all call it, Maso, and you have quite a long time myself, key in everything when you're going through your struggles and trials and so on, the important factor is to have support. The Bible itself says we are our brother's keeper. And no matter who you think you are, how strong you might think you are, nothing is more important than knowing there is someone there to care for you, to help you in your time of need. On my side, unfortunately, my daughter-in-law, who got breast cancer at the age of 38, passed away at the age of 39, and definitely was a difficult time. But I believe that those who have survived and are still fighting it, I believe that, as was said before, it is important that as much as possible, the awareness is brought out there, and that emotional support, physical support, as you mentioned, Maso, washing, cleaning, and so on, that is vital. And I really hope that you'll get more persons to join on and to ensure that the task becomes a little lighter, because I know it's not easy emotionally and physically, but I believe you all are doing a tremendous job and continue to do so. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to extend to Brenda Maynard and her family my deepest sympathy and condolences on behalf of myself and my family, and if I may, on behalf of National Alliance, on the loss of her stepfather. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George Pontiflet. And the final speaker listed, at least, is MP Rolando Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, to Kafir, my colleagues, the minister, and everyone present today. First of all, I do want to also share condolences to Ms. Brenda Maynard, who is here in Parliament with us. And we get the members of Parliament. We do our work, but what is not seen is the work that's done behind the scenes by people like Brenda, who will still have to put on a strong face to come to do her work, but must definitely be hurting at this time. And I really give her and her family our sincere condolences. I want to also echo the sentiments from the previous speakers on, all of the good attention that is being placed, especially on the Parliament of St. Martin, and also inviting the organization to come and speak today. I think it might be a bit symbolic, but it also shows the respect that Parliament has given. It's not a normal thing where, we do something like that, but it's, I think, our gesture of appreciation for everything you are doing. And I was very happy, Mr. Chairman, to hear the foundation say point blank, if you want to help, what we do, inviting them here, giving them a platform wearing pink definitely helps a lot. But the financial component can't be ignored. I think more organizations, more individuals, I myself am going to commit and sit with them after about doing a donation and helping you with that. But we have to rally the business community, especially, behind these type of causes. Corporate social responsibility, you have some organizations that do a lot, some more in sports or in other areas, but I would like to make also a call to the business community, big and small. Every donation helps, and you've just learned of a very good cause to help. And if there's any way myself or MP Bijlani or other MPs can help with that, I'm sure we would be happy to help make that call for you as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Bryson, MP Heiliger Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I completely forgot to mention during notification that, as you're aware, now that I'm an independent member of parliament, that I am a bit displaced in seating. So I'll be sending in writing to the Presidium a proposed seating for me to have a fixed spot in this setting because we can't be playing musical chairs. So I'll be sending it. I spoke to some of the members of parliament, so I'll be sending it in writing to the Presidium for approval. Thank you.
All right, we shall be awaiting it. I want to thank all the members who joined in the notifications, and I too would like to make use of the opportunity to extend words of support to not only the Still Beautiful Foundation, but all the other organizations out there. We want to continue to encourage the different organizations and foundations who are doing their utmost to bring breast cancer awareness to the community. One of the important things that was mentioned indeed, it is one thing to wear a pink shirt, or wear a pink pin, or fly a pink flag for that matter. But the support given to breast cancer patients, we sometimes don't recognize that help and that support that they need. Someone to help them cook, someone to help them wash, clean, iron, go shopping, taking them shopping and things like that. That too is probably even more important than showing your pink support. That is the symbolic part, but now to get people to, as they say, put their money where their mouth is and come out and support a patient. It is almost needless to say that every one of us in here has lost over the years either a family member or a close friend. And it is not something that affects the poor people or the rich people or the local people only. It affects all of us. And we are indeed to be our brother's keeper. So I would like at this time to thank once again the representatives of the Still Beautiful Foundation for their presence here today and for the information they shared with Parliament and the public. I hereby would therefore like to adjourn this meeting for 5 minutes for a photo opportunity with the members of the Still Beautiful Foundation who are present, along with members of Parliament. And after that, we will bid our farewell to Maso and her team. Meeting adjourned for 5 3/4 minutes. Meeting adjourned. And for this meeting, we have as agenda point, two agenda points: approval provisions, President of Parliament to participate in the plenary session of Eurolat in Brussels, Belgium, from November 30th through December 2nd, 2022. This invitation came in incoming document 049 of the parliamentary year 2023, dated September 30th, 2022. De second agenda point, ontwerp van landsverordening tot wijziging van de landsverordening begroting 2022, landsverordening begrotingswijziging 2022, ingezonden stuk, ingekomen stuk 104, 2022, zittingsjaar 2023. De dato 21 oktober, mijn verjaardag 2022. Zittingsjaar 2022-2023/164. Draft National Ordinance amending the National Ordinance 222, Budget National Ordinance, the Budget Amendment 222. Incoming document 104 of the parliamentary year 222-223, dated October 21st, 2022, of the parliamentary year 2022-2023, document 164. We go over to the agenda point 1. On September 30th, 2022, Parliament received the overview of Parlatino meetings that are scheduled for the second half of 2022, August to December 2022. This overview includes the plenary session of Eurolat in Brussels, Belgium, from November 30th through December 2nd, 2022. This document is registered as incoming document 049 of the parliamentary year 2022-2023, dated September 30th, 2022, and can be found on the P drive of Parliament. In a previous Central Committee meeting, Parliament approved for a delegation and travel arrangements for the Chair of Parliament, the Secretary General, and members of Parliament, as per the overview of Parlatino-related meetings for the second semester. While specification was made to the Junta Directiva and committee meetings, no specification was made of the Eurolat, which also forms part of this overview. Hence today this agenda point. The proposal is therefore for Parliament to approve this work visit for the Chair of Parliament and the Secretary General of Parliament to attend the plenary session of Eurolat in Brussels, Belgium, from November 30th through December 2nd, 2022. The proposal is furthermore to approve the travel arrangements for the delegation. To which member of Parliament can I give the floor? Thank you, members of Parliament. If there are no comments, the proposal is approved. We go over to agenda point 2, draft national ordinance amending the national ordinance on the 2022 budget, the National Ordinance Budget Amendment 2022, incoming document 104 of this parliamentary year 2022-2023, dated October 21st, 2022, of the parliamentary year 2022-2023, document 164. Parliament received the draft National Ordinance Budget Amendment 2022 on October 21st, 2022. As mentioned several times before, incoming document 104 of this parliamentary year. All members have received a copy of the draft national ordinance via email and can also be found on the P drive of Parliament. At this time, I would like to give the floor to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Artwell Irion, for some opening remarks and presentation on the draft National Ordinance Budget Amendment 2022 of October 21st, 2022. We adjourn briefly for the minister to get so we need to adjourn. Minister of Finance, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the Kafir. Good morning to the members of Parliament. Good morning to the people of St. Martin. I'd also like to, if I may, extend my deepest condolences to our colleague, Ms. Brenda Maynard, and her family on the passing of her stepfather. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll go into the presentation. This draft National Ordinance Budget Amendment 2022 reflects the financial position, prospects, and policy intentions of the country, St. Martin, for the year 2022. The basis for this budget amendment is the approved budget 2022. Adjustments were made based on Article 12 advice of the CFT. Obviously, due to the pandemic, we saw a decline in tourism. This had a negative impact on the hospitality sector, which in turn had consequences for the revenue collection of government. Although we see an increase in the economic activity, still expecting a deficit in this budget. When I was here last time, I mentioned as well, but would like to reiterate that, however, the budget process is still at work in progress, and the ministry is working on improving this process. We can see that both the Council of Advice and the CFT recognizes and have indicated that there has been significant improvement in both the approved budget 2022 and this amendment. The budget was approved by Parliament in January 2022 and published March of this year. After the budget has been established, the budget has to go to CFT according to Article 12 of the RFT. This was done in April, we received a negative advice from CFT on approved budget 2022. This negative advice initiated the process of this budget amendment. I will now discuss the differences between the approved budget 2022 and the 2022 budget amendment. The increase in income is due to an adjustment in the assigned of 1 million guilders. This change was made based on more recent information that we received. We expect the assigned to be approximately 1 million guilders higher. In addition, we have also included 8.5 million guilders contributions that we expect to receive from the Netherlands in relation to some of the projects in the country packages. The total expenses compared to approved budget 2022 decreased by 13.5 million guilders, which is mainly due to the decrease in material costs. As it relates to personnel expenses, we see an increase of 9.8 million guilders in this amendment. This is a difference due to an increase in the health care expenses for civil servants, what we call the OZR, under the Ministry of VSA of 4 million guilders. The adjustment is based on the information we received from SFV. And also 7 million guilders for vacation allowance. Besides the increase in expenses, we also adjusted the vacancies that have not been filled as yet. This led to a decrease in expenses of 1.2 million guilders. As for the material costs, there's a decrease of 23.3 million guilders. The biggest changes are in the economic categories of goods and services, which decreased by 31 million guilders. Social Security increased with 3.1 million guilders. This is based on an adjustment of the medical aid. As for the medical expenses for civil servants, this adjustment is based on information we also again received from SSV. In this amendment, we also added 8.5 million guilders for projects related to the country packages. Our total capital investment in the amendment for 2022 is approximately 1 second. Okay. Our total capital investments in amendment for 2022 is approximately 335.9 million guilders, of which 306.5 is related to loans and student scholarships. The balance of the 29.5 million is to acquire capital goods. As you can see, the capital expenditure for goods decreased from 94.1 million guilders to 29.4 million guilders. It was decided to only include investments for which there were underlying plans. What we also saw was, since I believe 2014, no capex was given to Country St. Martin, and only, I believe, in 2019 it was approved again by CFT, but the Kingdom Council of Ministers didn't subscribe to it. What we didn't want to go through this year with amendment is have any wish list by ministries, but actually have projects that were properly substantiated, and this also led us to be basically being given the green light by CFT now for the loans that in this budget amendment once it is approved. So we went through a process of going with the Ministry of Finance, going with every ministry, looking at their investments, going through their plans, the reasons why, and if they have proper financial documents to back it up. For 2022, the government will require loans for a total of 421 million. This includes the refinancing of 6 tranches of liquidity support for a total of 292.4 million guilders. These 6 tranches matured in 2022. A new loan has been received to refinance the existing loans. We also need an amount of 27.6 million guilders to be able to cover our capital expenditures. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, we can say that despite an increase in economic activities on the island, we can still see the negative impacts of COVID. In addition to this, we also see the man-made disasters from the war in Russia and Ukraine that also has had a significant impact on our country. We are gradually seeing growth also in the country's income, but we are still not at the same level as pre-COVID or certainly not pre-Irma. Besides the several uncertainties, the government is still committed to realize their vision, our vision, as mentioned in the coalition agreement. And I'd like to end with the realization of a country with a strong multi-pillar economy where opportunities exist, which empowers each citizen to realize their strength to progress at all levels, a place where every dream can be realized. Mr. Chairman, that is the conclusion of this budget amendment presentation, and look forward to the questions posed by members of Parliament.
Thank you, Minister Irion, for your brief presentation. And I want to request of members of Parliament, if you would be so kind to forward, if possible, your questions to the Secretariat of Parliament to help facilitate the process of the report that has to be made and sent to government. So if you have your questions digitally, you can forward them to the Secretariat. At this point in time, we have one speaker listed, MP Westcott Williams. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you once again for the opportunity, and a good morning, and of course a good morning again to our minister and his support staff. Mr. Chairman, I firstly sort of a question in terms of the handling of the budget 2022 in Central Committee. Is it the intention that only the minister presents here, and our questions that would relate to other ministries, that these are then taken up by the minister and we will get the answers from all ministries? That's a question I'm putting out there. And so with that question, and I saw the chairperson of Parliament sort of nodding in agreement, so I suspect that's how it would go. Mr. Chairman, the last statement in the presentation of the minister would prompt me to ask, albeit that this amended budget is now 10 months into the year 2022. So, for 10 months, the government has been acting on one, the approved budget for 2022, and anything else that the government wanted or did not want to do, which we will now find in the amended budget. Because we have 2 more months left in 2022. So the government has operated on a informal amended budget, and now Parliament gets it. Now Parliament gets this amended budget, and we are, of course, expected to approve it. However, considering, Mr. Chairman, that in the absence of a 2023 budget, this budget 2022 would be the basis for governance, I will still ask a few questions regarding what is before us, albeit I ask myself the relevance of even going through this debate here on the 2022 budget at this time in the year 2022. But one of the last comments by the minister prompts me to ask a general question, which I can imagine would be deflected by the minister, and that is the state, generally speaking, of our state. The state of the country, overall speaking. The minister referred to the coalition agreement. So straight up, Mr. Chairman, this coalition agreement that was to be reviewed by 2 members who joined the coalition on the 30th of June of this year, has that review taken place? Did it lead to any reconsiderations? Does the Minister of Finance, speaking about the state of the country, the state of the state, not consider it the right thing to do to inform the Parliament of St. Martin regarding the government in general, the coalition in general, and its support or not? Does not the minister / the government feel that that is an important aspect to inform Parliament where we stand? Is the document of the 30th of June as circulated in the media at the time, is that an official document? And if it is, can that document be provided to Parliament? So the state of the state, the state of the coalition, the state of the government. Mr. Chairman, in the Parliament salary post, there is an increase, and I ask, what's the basis for this increase? So the salary post under the Parliament is, there's an increase, and what's the basis for that? On the salaries under the Parliament's chapter. And then, other goods and services have been cut with more than 50%. Again, I'm still with Parliament's budget as presented by the government. What was proposed by Parliament for the amount budgeted and approved in 2022? And what is the effect or effects of the cut with more than 50% from the budget, goods and services of the Parliament of St. Martin? Mr. Chairman, in the approval of the budget 2022, an amendment was made that cut the budget of the Integrity Chamber with somewhere around 700,000 guilders. I asked the minister, or the Prime Minister rather, how this cut would affect the operation of the Integrity Chamber. to that letter to the Prime Minister, there has been no answer, and I would like the answers to be given during the handling of this budget. So, now that the Integrity Chamber is to receive 1.7 million guilders, plus I want to ask what has the cut, because let's back up there a minute, Mr. Chairman. The government of St. Martin, not Parliament, the government of St. Martin proposed a budget for the Integrity Chamber of 2.4 something million guilders. By an amendment, this was reduced with approximately 700,000. Right now, it's at 1.7 million guilders. Again, what has this, if anything, done to the operations of the Integrity Chamber, for which the government of St. Martin submitted a budget of 2.4? What has this done? Did the government over budget for the Integrity Chamber so that you could have then cut it with 700,000, 900,000, whatever the case may be? Mr. Chairman, throughout the budget, the matter of disaster management, in the case of Rome, for example, it is called calamiteitenbestrijding, all to deal with disasters and calamities. But a lot of these funds throughout the budget, including under the Ministry of General Affairs, has been cut. And my question is, why has this been cut? Is it because we were reserving for potential calamities during 2022, and because none happened to any great extent at least, we then cut the budget? So again, the budget, starting with the budget of General Affairs, disaster money has been cut. It goes all through to Vromi, where you have calamiteitenbestrijding has been cut. Why? Facility Affairs, Ministry of General Affairs. Other goods have been decreased with 400,000 guilders. Why was it budgeted so high in the first place? And is it that to a great extent it was not realized? It did not happen, and that's why this budget could be decreased with 400,000 guilders. Mr. Chairman, the St. Martin Development Fund. Recently, the minister received, I believe it was their annual account maybe, or their yearly report, whichever one. Could that be shared with Parliament? This foundation has been receiving the same amount of money for, I believe, since probably 2011, 2012. So could the minister give some info in addition to that report that was presented? Can that report be presented to Parliament, the report of the St. Martin Development Fund, and give some perspective on the relationship between that organization and the government as far as funding is concerned? What is the proposal from the St. Martin Development Fund in terms of receiving subsidy, and was it more than what is budgeted currently for them, which is the same, as I mentioned before, for many years? Mr. Chairman, as part of the budget, we received a plethora of sheets on the car fleet of government. Are all of these cars mentioned under the car fleet operational cars? All of them that I mentioned is my question. And talking about cars, I don't see new cars mentioned. I see many new cars mentioned for SGs and those type of offices, but have not ministers gotten new cars recently? And if they have, why are these not in the listing of the cars? Mr. Chairman, throughout the budget, you got a whole lot of consultancy where ICT is concerned. Throughout the whole budget, all the different ministries. It's a panorama of, I guess, the ICT structure of government. From a general perspective, has it ever been looked at in terms of government's overall ICT infrastructure? Or is this too something that is going to be put off until we get this ICT project going as part of the National Recovery, or rather the Trust Fund? So the whole ICT department scan done, consultant scan done. Does government have an overview of that put together, and what our infrastructure and the consultancy on the infrastructure looks like? Mr. Chairman, I want to go over to the government institutions, the so-called, in the budget they're called Dale Namingen, so in which the government has ownership, full or partially. And this question was asked to the Prime Minister in a previous meeting, but I would like to hear it from the Minister. Minister, the reporting by many of these institutions seems to be seriously lacking. What is government doing with respect to that? One, how far are we with this matter of corporate governance restructuring? The EDC that is mentioned under the companies of government as an active company, what's the status of that, considering the plans that the minister announced some time ago? Has the concession that GEBE and Harbour supposed to pay to government, and which are budgeted, I think respectively, 4 million for the Harbour, 6.5 for GEBE. Have these monies been received? If not, is it expected that, for example, from GB we will get that kind of money still during 2022? And now, Mr. Chairman, I hope that this morning I can get a straight answer on the matter of the 12.5% cut from the salary packages of government and semi-government institutions. I was informed, or the members of parliament were informed recently by the Prime Minister, that that information finally from the institutions have been had, that the Minister of Finance received that information. Could we receive this information? Could we receive the information as to how the different institutions, school boards and the like, have applied the 12.5% cut? How will this matter, and how is it being rectified? I saw where the Minister of Finance and the Deputy Prime Minister had meetings with some of these institutions. Where do we stand? Why is it still an issue where some school boards and payment, non-payment of, for example, vacation allowance is? And then in this budget book, it is stated that the government has kept in 10% from the subsidies for the 12.5% cut. And my question is this correct? Yes or no? I want to repeat it. In the elucidation to the budget, it is stated that government has kept ingehouden, I guess is the translative part of that, 10% from the subsidies, and it continues for the 12.5%. And I ask, is this correct? Yes or no? Gaming, the Gaming Control Board. Again, it is in the budget. How far are we? I know this is part of the country package, but in the meantime, the minister proudly announced a couple of weeks ago that he/the government have an ongoing agreement with the casinos and I guess some lottery operators in terms of paying of back taxes, back whatever. And I would like to know from the minister who exactly, what agreements have been made, for what amount, and the arrangements for repayment of these outstanding amounts. So not just that they have had discussions and all is well and dandy, but I want to know which casinos, how much they owe, and what is the agreement for repayment. Mr. Chairman, under the tax chapter, we have where, for example, an amount of 1.8 million is cited under country package, Lance packet, and then a 3 million that was under control and compliance has been taken away. The support, the understanding, has been cut with 1.4 million guilders. So could the minister explain this relationship between what was budgeted originally and now what we are cutting and putting it under a topic to fit the country package for the relevant item? So I would like to know and receive a specification of the 8.5 million guilders from the Dutch government for projects in the context of the country package. Mr. Chairman, it is stated in the budget that we have 71 vacancies for the year 2022, 4 more than budgeted. So I would like to know, during the course of the year, during the free spending of the government in the past 10 months, how many of these vacancies have been filled? I would like to know from the minister, what is the status of the parked vacation days of civil servants? Parked in terms of, because if I understand it right, mind you, it's not very well explained, but if I understand it right, until the government gets the complete go-ahead for the elimination of the cuts, so in other words, until the government gets the go-ahead for paying out the vacation allowance, which they did in June, vacation days of civil servants needed to be parked, so they can't use their vacation days. Is this still the case? I would like to know from government on the SZV, the financial relationships, the current agreements, and compliance with these agreements. I've asked regarding the 8 million that is supposedly received, to be received in subsidies for the country package. As one of the capital investments under the Ministry of Education, we have, again, I would say, a capital investment, 1 tablet per child. What exactly is this project? How will it be executed, and by whom? What is the status with respect to the reorganization of the school bus transportation? Mr. Chairman, yesterday, I believe it was, we had a discussion with the Minister of Education regarding laws, legislation. Amongst other things, legislation on tertiary education. And the minister, one of the minister's concerns and dilemmas is the fact that having staff, his staff is thinly spread and got to deal with so many pieces of legislation. Yet, the legal advice post in the education ministry is reduced from 800,000 to 200,000 guilders. How, what, how are my questions to that. The community schools have been reduced with 33%. What was the original basis of the budget of 1.7 million for community schools if it now can be reduced with 33%? Are these projects not executed? Are they not paid for? Was it over budgeted to start with that it can now be reduced with 33%? And I'm talking community schools. Youth policy implementation reduced with 130,000 guilders, and the question is why? We had too much? It's not an important item in the budget, so we're going to reduce it? Study financing has been reduced with 1 million guilders. Explain why and give an overview on where we stand with respect to study financing in terms of how many we got going, how many we expect to get going, etc. Under the budget of VSA, Public Health, Social Development and Labor, in total for projects and activities, an amount of 9 million was scrapped. So I would like to know, when this was originally budgeted for 15.7 million guilders, what was the purpose for this? What was the purpose for that post? And what does the scrapping do? While on the topic of VSA, could I receive from the Minister of VSA an overview now, down the line, of the cost of the pandemic and on what items for the government of St. Martin? Material, and that kind of thing. Mr. Chairman, and here is where what I have, I don't want to use the word predicted, but what I have stated over and over again is that when it comes to the budget of the country, St. Martin, we're going to see the friction between the government's own wishes and the imposed projects under the country package. And under economic affairs, such is very evident. Under the Ministry of Economic Affairs, government had planned for example, a diversification study, a national economic plan, a public transportation assessment, and this has been dropped in favor of 450,000 guilders for the country package. Will these things just mentioned, diversification study, national economic plan, and public transportation assessment, will that be part of the country package project, is my question. And now, under the same economic affairs, under the Tourist Bureau, an amount was budgeted of 7.9 million guilders and reduced with 42%. We are talking promotion, marketing, I mean, you name it. Under the Tourist Bureau. What was this done for? So that a knight in shining armor could come and demand of the government that they change the budget and increase it? Is that the reason why this was our marketing and promotion of the island was cut with 42%? So what are we looking for? A knight in shining armor to come and increase it? And then government will say, well, we had nothing, we couldn't do anything else. Parliament has the last word. We have a majority in Parliament, and if they decide for that, then it has to happen. Is that what the government is looking for? If not, if that's not it, then please, can someone explain the cut in this budget? I want to know from the 140,000 guilders budgeted for small, medium enterprise, what's the project? What are we doing with that for small, medium enterprise? I asked and received a couple of months ago the SME policy, so the small, medium enterprise policy of government. But I want to know what is the budget for SME meant for. And then, Mr. Chairman, Carnival. Let me tell you how I perceived this whole thing to have gone. So we had a budget. We know it was taken out because the government decided they're going to put Carnival on bid. That's what the government decided. Then we read in the media, because of course these things the government don't find it necessary to apprise Parliament of or to update Parliament on. So then we read that apparently government and the Carnival Foundation were going to work something out. Did this working something out happen? And if it did, does it include a subsidy for the Carnival Foundation? And if it did include a subsidy for the Carnival Foundation, where in the budget is that to be found and under what item? Mr. Chairman, you would recall that a few months into office, our Minister of Justice came out swinging on the immigration on this island. Zero tolerance policy where immigration is concerned. If you were here illegally, you were advised to leave peacefully, or the law would be used against one. What that turned out into, we don't know. Because again, why would they inform Parliament? These 15 members sitting here, why? But then we learned of a policy now that would suggest something in the realm of a sort of an amnesty, sort of a grace period, but not really grace period, nothing like the Brooks Tower Agreement, but related to it kind of. I would like to know what is exactly the policy. What is taking place now? Is there a written policy for such, and can we have it? Because it can be that these things are up to the discretion. So who get, who don't get, who have to file, who don't have to file, up to the discretion of the minister and or the ministry, I hope. Mr. Chairman, the matter of the prison and the amounts mentioned and what we're going to get from the Netherlands and what we have to put ourselves in the budget, in which we put in the budget. A very stern letter apparently was sent to the Dutch government regarding the involvement of UNOPS in the reconstruction or the renewal of the prison. What and where is the relationship currently with UNOPS? What is it now? Are they still in the picture? And if they're not, who's picking up the slack for them? The matter of the Coast Guard and the reduction in our subsidy to them, please explain. Under Vromi, the government gave a figure for collection of long lease in 2020 for 6.5 million guilders. Can the minister inform us how much was collected in long lease in 2021? Because that's not mentioned in this documentation that we have before us. And it's mentioned that they had, like, I guess, 22 agreements, decisions regarding granting long lease land. So 22 more than was there. I would like to know what is 22 so-called mutations, mutatis in the amount of long list? What is it? Where is it? How is it? Commercial, residential, whatever. If I can get to know that. Mr. Chairman, looking at the income side of the budget, I want to get a good and a clear explanation as to the relationship between government and funding of projects in the context of the country package. What, how much, etc. Is all of it co-financing? Are some things that the Dutch government is going to finance for us? Give me a breakdown on this matter. Now with the capital budget before us, what is to be done by the different ministries to effectuate the capital budget? So, are all of these projects that are mentioned in the budget for capital investments, capital expenses, have they been worked out? And if so, can we receive the worked out prognosis of the capital expenses? Because I guess the Minister of Finance is going to need all of that in order to solicit the loans for capital expenses from, guess who? The Dutch government. Can we be updated on the matter of the executive protection unit that is on the subsidy list? Could we receive some type of information as to what is happening there? And Mr. Chairman, for this round in this Central Committee meeting on this budget, 10 months down in the year, I want to leave it here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. We have no further speakers. We do. MP Grisha Heilager Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Chairman, I would like to refer to a number of letters that I sent to the Minister of Finance with questions about overall financial management and the sustainability of St. Martin's finances on short, medium, and long term. In those letters, I made some suggestions as well. The last one, which was specifically about refinancing alternatives for St. Martin's outstanding debts to the Netherlands, was not yet answered. And since I specifically requested a response prior to the last IPCO in The Hague, I would like to take this opportunity to ask the Minister if and when an answer will be forthcoming. I also want to remind the Minister, through you, Mr. Chair, that the Dutch government has indicated that the current outstanding loans will need to be refinanced by next year. So in that light, I urge the Minister not to wait until the last minute to inform Parliament of his plans. Mr. Chairman, seeing that these budget amendments for 2022 are being debated almost at the end of the year, it is important for the general public to get a recap of what we're dealing with here today. So with your indulgence, I would like to ask the Honorable Minister of Finance some additional questions so that those who don't have the options to actually go through the entire budget can get an idea of what the amendments will mean for St. Martin in general. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a few questions. Can the Minister give his overall opinion on the CFT advice on the budget amendment 2022? And can the Minister explain, through you, Mr. Chair, in layman's terms, how the amendment of the budget related to Carnival was made and what it will mean for Carnival in the coming year? I see MP Westcott delved into that earlier. I have some questions related to the Integrity Chamber, and was it budgeted for this institution? Was it in the budget amendment? And if so, and if not, why? Mr. Chairman, St. Martin was supposed to start off in 10-10-10 with a clean slate, meaning zero debt. the CFT was put in place to ensure that no more debt was incurred. Yet we see that on January 1st, our debt already at 901 million guilders and increased with 43 million to 944 million during 2022. What was the actual debt situation in 10-10-10 and how much debt was written off? Mr. Chairman, how has it been possible that under the CFT 12 years later, St. Martin has a debt of almost 1 billion guilders? What are the projections for this debt in the coming 5 years, and how does the minister intend to deal with it? See also my questions of August in the letter that I sent to the minister, Mr. Chair. This is also why a response to my letter is so crucial. Does the minister believe that the RFTA and the CFTA have actually worked how they were intended to do? So if not, what does the minister believe should happen to the RFTA and CFT? And if the minister, lastly, my last question, is the minister believe that the RFT and the CFT, if the RFC and CFT do work, how does he explain the debt of 944 million? So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will send my questions, if it's not clear, to the Minister of Finance, and I'll leave it here for now.
Thank you, MP Martin Heiliger. Martin, rather. I see MP Rolando Bryson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to one and all once again. Mr. Chairman, I've spoken a little bit within this parliament about this budget amendment being anticipated, and a lot of what we see here could easily be anticipated when you follow the advices that you see from, for example, the CFT. You see the information coming out. We have the reports from April and in June that were sent to us, and that already sounded the alarm that made it clear to me that the government is under pressure from the CFT, which they basically admitted to us in a closed door, well, in response to one of my questions, that, yeah, they said, you know what, we think the country is doing better than expected, so you don't need 30 million as much as before. If I just paraphrase what more or less their advice is telling the country, St. Martin. And I want to start by asking the minister this sort of question. It might be a bit of a philosophical one, in that, do we feel sometimes that as a country, St. Martin, when we hear from the CFT here in this parliament that Curacao and Aruba are performing in almost every objective financial measure worse than us, from a budgetary perspective, their incomes and so on. And St. Martin is the good boy in the club. We have all these financial statements for backlog that have been put to here. We're getting, this is what, the third or fourth budget this minister is handling within the last year and a half. We have all of these different things we're doing. And instead of getting a sort of a chutzpah from the CFT, what you get is, hey, good job making the worst of a terrible situation, so we're going to just make it a little harder for you by now making you cut an additional 30 million or whatever was within their advice at that time. And Mr. Chairman, for the minister's edification, one of my suggestions was to CFT, or the question, when they make such an advice, does it mean that the ministry has to follow that advice? And of course, the answer is going to be, no, we don't have, it's just an advice, we can follow that. But we know in reality what actually happens, because it happened last time. You get an advice from the CFT before the 2022 original budget was passed. The minister sends the budget to Parliament. We handle the budget, we do amendments, we do etc. And then after that budget is passed, you get a so-called negative advice. And when you read this advice, you see some things in here that don't really make much sense to me. And I would like some clarity from the minister on this and his position on it. Because, for example, one of the things the CFT pointed out in their advice on the 2020, not this one, but the original 2022 budget, was that we didn't take inflation sufficiently into account. But, Mr. Chairman, if you take inflation into account in the budget, does that not mean that the cost of products and services have gone up? In other words, your expenses can't go down, your expenses should go up. So my question to the minister is, how is inflation factored into the preparation of such a budget? When you looked at 2022, we saw record inflation levels in the United States. We have a kind of an unofficially dollarized economy, so you would imagine that had an effect. But the CFT is saying, no, but you know what, you didn't calculate inflation sufficiently. It's not as bad as you think, so you actually can cut another 30 million. These are some of the arguments they use. And I want to get a grasp from the minister. When he sees this advice, what does he see? What does he feel the CFT is getting at here? Because personally, what I feel this looks like, it looks like St. Martin is constantly being punished for exceeding expectations. It's as if it's better, you know, our economy doesn't do as great, that we don't continue to, together with the government and the private sector, grow this economy. All of the great news that is coming for 2023 in terms of the hotel sector, airlines, marketing, etc. No, cut the tourism budget. That's the response to those efforts. Why is the CFT's response not, hey, good job, let's see if we can double down on this? You know, Minister, why don't you spend a little more? You never get that from the CFT. And then the government is put in a position where either you go with the advice of the CFT or you risk an instruction, because that's the ultimate thing that will happen. And you see it happening in other countries, and we try to avoid it here to preserve our self-determination. But I really have a concern about this method of budgeting, where Parliament passes a budget, negative advice comes after the fact, adjustments are made in an amendment that then reverse the things that we want to do. One of the good things I did see, and it's good that this question was posed already, and it has to do with the Integrity Chamber. Because, Mr. Chairman, yes, I presented that amendment to cut the Integrity Chamber by over 700,000 guilders to the 1.7 that it was originally budgeted at, and that remains at the 1.7 and change that it's going to be for the rest of the year. So in other words, we are now approaching November. So for 10 months in the year, the Integrity Chamber has, as far as I know, they're still open. As a matter of fact, I think they're more active than I've ever seen them before in terms of their PR, in terms of their interaction, in terms of their videos and all this stuff. You would think they got a budget increase. So I'm happy to see that we've come to this point where the ministry or the Minister of General Affairs or the Integrity Chamber did not present something to try to reverse that, because I think that is now an acknowledgement that actually, yes, stay to what the law said. The law said you need to have a budget between 1.5 and 1.8 million. That's in the Memorandum von Toelichting of the law. We brought it back in line with that. You have to make it work with that. And I'm sure one of the major cuts the Integrity Chamber made was this unnecessary travel of members from the Netherlands on the board coming to St. Martin 6-7 times a year. That alone was enough to justify the cut. And I'm hoping, and I really do see more activity from them, but I hope it's now understood that I think that was the right way, the right place to put that budget. But in addition to that, what we did with that budget cut, we then redistributed that to the other high councils. So the high councils also then received an increase in 2022 of a ranging between 50 and 75,000 guilders, if I recall correctly. And I would like to ask if we have any indication from the high councils how they were able to make use of some of this additional funds. If we can maybe get a short comment from each of the high councils on that as well, because I didn't see that in the policy document attached to this budget. Let me see. Mr. Chairman, I also noticed in the advices from the CFT, both the advice post the approval of the 2022 budget and the most recent advice, the CFT notes that the ministry or the law, the budget, makes reference to certain statistics that have been put in place or have been verified by the IMF. And then the CFT turns around and says, for example, in the advice for the 2022 original budget, they say that the IMF, they don't agree with the IMF's projections for inflation. My question to the minister is, who is the competent authority, or who is more the competent authority to make a determination on the effects of inflation on a budget? Is it the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, that's coming here and doing these analysis and so on? Or is it just the CFT? They have now become the global experts in inflation calculations. So I would like to ask the minister, how do you reconcile the advices and information you get from an organization like the IMF? Then you have the CFT telling you the opposite. What do you do in that situation? The only difference, Mr. Chairman, of course, is that the IMF is not written into a kingdom law. That's really the only difference. But you will recall, Curacao had made some proposals to actually involve the IMF more in our budgetary oversight. Now, I'm going to say right here, I don't know if I would like to go that far, because the IMF also has its drawbacks in terms of funding and so on. But I think having them as a second opinion is valid, and I would like to know also what channels does the minister have in having the IMF give some sort of second opinion on our budgetary processes. That might be something helpful to members of parliament. I did read their most recent, I think they call it the Kingdom Consultation, and I quoted that before, where the IMF, again, totally different opinion from the CFT. They are saying the cuts to civil servants should not only be reversed, but we should have some sort of a merit system in place for performance goals and so on. So how does the minister juxtapose these two different organizations and their advices? Minister, now my gravest concern with this budget is, of course, the tourism budget. And it's not so much a concern because, as is rightly stated, this is an amendment that is coming towards the end of the year. But I need to know, and this will be more, Mr. Chairman, for the Minister of TIAT and the St. Martin Tourist Bureau, who I know has been doing their best with very little. Because the minute this advice was gone, and maybe the minister can explain how this works, is because when a negative advice from CFT comes in, you have an approved 2022 budget. So my question is, how much has the Tourist Bureau spent until now? How much has been appropriated by the St. Martin Tourist Bureau? Can we get a figure, at least a good estimate? I know it could be a little complicated because you have contracts, but then the payment terms are different. But please, if the Ministry of TIAT, STB, give me an estimate on how much has been spent until now. And the reason I ask that is specifically what is going to be done in the months of November and December. Because I can understand. I don't think we need 3.7 million guilders to spend in November and December. But I would think the very least you want to do in November and December is, one, you want to continue your Expedia, TripAdvisor, and Booking.com campaigns. You want to go hard on that. So I want an update. Are those programs at risk as a result of this? I would like to know in terms of the co-op marketing campaigns with Sunwing, Frontier. We also trying to get Southwest to this country. Are those at risk as a result of this budget amendment, especially those three airlines? I would like an update on how the discussions are going with Southwest to travel from Dallas Love Field to St. Martin. I believe we were basically this close, and all that was missing is the co-op marketing campaign. I would like an update on that. I would also like an update on the Latin American budget. That is a budget where, when I saw the cut to it, even that is not as great a concern, because we currently still only have, if I'm not mistaken, 1, maybe 2 flights a week on Copa. The idea with the Latin American budget has always been that it would be able to justify increasing flights on Copa to 5, 6, 7 times a week. But if we haven't achieved that, then I can understand, all right, we're not going to use that now. But then the question now leads into 2023. Because, Minister, there's a couple things. I know we're debating the 2022 budget, but for me to have an understanding of why we would support this budget, I need some context on what's coming, Mr. Chairman. So I hope you'll allow me, and the minister will accept a few questions related to what next in terms of tourism. Because we are now at the end of the year, and if there's some cuts because, you know what, certain programs were phased out, we didn't do Latin American marketing because Copa started late, etc., all of that is fine. But in 2023, now you have a full year of marketing. We finally got the tourism budget to a respectable level, which was just under 8 million guilders. Okay, still has the 8 million guilders, by the way, is still the third lowest tourism budget in the entire Caribbean, only behind Montserrat and Anguilla. Imagine that. But 8 million at least was bringing it back to the 2012 level, which at the time I think it was a sharp increase brought forward by the Minister of TIAT at the time, Minister Frankie Myers, that said, look, we can't have this little 3-4 million guilder budget. I believe he had proposed to double it. So we're back at that level, but now we're taking a step back again. Is the intention from the government to maintain this 4.5 million and not go back to the 8 million? Because I have a concern with that. And I understand, okay, income is related to expense. As I told the CFD in the meeting recently, 91% of our GDP is covered from tourism. And when you look at the cuts that were made to this budget, on a percentage level, the largest cut was made to the Ministry of Tourism and Economic Affairs. You have a 3 million guilder cut out of 21 million. And if you take that percentage, it is the highest percentage cut. The minister, I see, is shaking his head. He can correct me if I'm wrong. But based on the presentation that I just saw, and in the summary sheet, if you take the, let me try and pull it up here. Yes, if you look at where the ministries, where he has General Affairs, Finance, etc., you have TSZVT, which is, we know it as TIAT, from 29 to 27, but it says -3, so I'll call that maybe a round up or something. As a percentage, that's the biggest cut. Because if you look at, yes, 5 million was cut from justice, for example, from 122 to 118, but as a percentage, 5 million from 122 is less of a percentage than 27 million from 29. So why are we, I get it, but we need some type of justification for why the tourism and economic budgets of this country are being cut. And if it is that there's an explanation that maybe, like I said, I can imagine Latin America. That's an explanation, but explain me what happened in the Caribbean budget. Did we not continue with the plans, for example, to have Winair take over some of those marketing funds from Caribbean and get marketing done within our Caribbean region, our national airline? So I think we need a good overall statement from the Ministry of TIAT. What is going on with this tourism marketing budget? And I'm going to come back now to what I think needs to happen in 2023. Mr. Chairman, in 2016 and 2017, there was a team put together from the Tourist Bureau, the Economic Policy Department, and Legal Affairs to explore the increasing of the hotel tax from 5%, which I've stated many times. It is a fact that this is the lowest hotel tax in the entire Caribbean. The Caribbean average is 12%. The task force came to the point where we felt that it can be increased to 10%. And when meeting with the stakeholders, let's say the understanding was that they would, I don't want to say accept, because it's not really their choice, it's really up to the Parliament of St. Martin, but they would endorse such an increase if the surplus that's generated goes back to tourism. Now, when you look at the budget, we have a projected income of 2.5 million guilders in logier gasten belasting. Okay? If you increase your hotel tax from 5% to 10%, that is an increase of 2.5 million guilders. Mr. Chairman, I believe the hotels and the stakeholders would also agree that if you increase the hotel tax from 5 to 10% and that additional 2.5 million guilders goes into marketing, that would be something that you could probably introduce into the legislation of the 2023 budget. And it's something that I would like to ask the Minister of Finance as well as the Minister of TIAT to consider. Consider including an increase to the hotel tax from 5 to 10%, but that additional 2.5 million guilders, put it back into tourism and get the tourism budget back to the 8 million, where at the minimum it belongs. So I would like maybe the minister to give me some feedback on that. I know the minister in the past has mentioned, for example, that maybe we want to get rid of the hotel tax and do TOT instead. And as I pointed out before to the minister, this is exactly why I said that's the one tax you should keep out of TOT, because the hotel tax can be adjusted based on market conditions. And that's something that you don't want to charge a 5% or a 6% TOT on a hotel when you should be charging 10, 11, 12, maybe 15% like other countries. I wouldn't go that high, but at the very least we should be at 10%. Then Carnival. Well, this is a topic some people like to talk about, emotional hijacking. I think this is the one where I saw it the most in this parliament, where there was no form of real objective discussion on, okay, we are talking about a subsidy, okay? A subsidy from government that goes to an organization that is in the budget of St. Martin. And in the subsidy ordinance, it is very clear about what you can ask and expect from an organization. And the information shared with the parliament and provided to parliament, and that I'm aware of, is that that is not being met. We hear of the financial issues. We see it all over social media. It's getting worse and worse, and I've been warning about this. I've been telling people the situation with the SCDF. I appreciate all the hard work that they've done. I appreciate Carnival every year. I love Carnival. But because I love Carnival, I cannot sit by and see the impending disaster that is coming from an organization that is financially not able to host Carnival anymore. This is the point where it is getting. And for them to scapegoat, and they can continue, I got broad shoulders, can continue to come with whatever excuses they want. The financials don't lie. Go on the SOAB website and read the financials. The decree from Stuart Johnson is still there. Wasn't this government or even this party that insisted that the SOAB audits had to be done? It was that minister. And it would be interesting if people knew who the person was that instructed that minister to tell him to do that. But now today, we are here trying to preserve Carnival, to make sure that an event happens. And what will happen, and this is my question to the government, what are they going to do to prevent a situation where in April, people are ready and coming to open Carnival in the booths, and stakeholders who have not been paid or who are not happy or all of this walk out on Carnival? What is being done to prevent an unfortunate situation like that from happening? Because we can talk about everything else, no problem. But at the end of the day, how are we as Parliament on the budgetary side and government on their interactions with SCDF or and SOK and all these different stakeholders going to step in to make sure that Carnival 2023 is a reality? Let us remember, we're talking about finances here. And the Carnival as an event, not the organization, but that period, is a huge economic boost for the country. F&B sales go up through the roof. Taxes also go up. Some people don't really realize that, I believe, and maybe the minister can comment on this, and I could imagine with this minister, he probably have his people there by the village, counting the tickets, collecting that TOT. It is probably one of the most highest tax compliance periods in St. Martin, Carnival. A lot of economic activity. We cannot put that at risk because of friends or people that we know. We have to be bigger than that and be ready for what is coming. So I hope this has the attention of the government and communicate, because what I will agree, or if it is true that the SCDF is saying that there was no communication, which is what they said in this parliament, that is a concern, and the government needs to set that record straight. Because indeed, if there was like no communication, we ain't talking to them, no, that's not right. I think maybe the Minister of Finance should get a statement from the Prime Minister on that to set that record clear, because yes, you do need to communicate with them and all stakeholders and find out what is really going on for next Carnival 2023. Okay? All I care about is that it happens, and it happens in a financially sound manner, that everybody can be paid. We are all tired. I think maybe everybody in here get a message at some point during Carnival, hey boy, I ain't get this, I ain't get that. No. You know, from the Queens to the Calypsonians to the sound, the light, security, and everything. I would like to ask about government-owned entities and the incomes. In the financial statements, we did talk a little bit about this in terms of the minister mentioned, for example, that the harbor is being very proactive in coming up with its own dividend policy. So again, kudos to Mr. Gums for doing that. How are the other entities following suit? And I didn't see any changes on the income side from government-owned entities unless I missed it in this budget amendment. Is there anything that we can look forward to, an improvement in what the government-owned companies are giving to the government? I also don't see in this budget amendment something I would have hoped for, and that is the SLS. I think whatever percentage, I don't know off the top of my head, I believe it's in the budget, but we are a part owner of SLS, if I'm not mistaken. And as a part owner, you're probably entitled to some type of percentage of the income that this entity derives. And let's be real, I think probably per, let's say, based on the size of the company, it's the most profitable company in the last 2 years that the government owns. But what has the government retained back from this company? Who has profited from this company, if not the government? Who has been the entities that have been making money on antigen tests that cost $5 and selling them at one point for $85? Or PCR tests that cost $17 and at one point we're going over $100. Huge profit margin, long lines at this establishment, relatively low expense. Where is that coming back to the government of St. Martin? What is the representation manner of the government either on this board or interacting with this entity? Is it you have a board member? Is it that you have meetings with them? Is it a general shareholder, or it's just you're just a owner and that's it? I would like to know and get to the bottom of what's going on at this entity in terms of the income that is there. We've read different reports of maybe there's fraud going on. Is that affecting the government's ability to get their share as well? We need to get to the bottom of what's happened at SLS. It is a profitable company and an important one. And if those profits are not being used to keep the company afloat or at least help the government, then where is it going? I would like to know, do we have financial statements from SLS, and can that be provided to the government of St. Martin as well? I mean, to the Parliament of St. Martin as well. Is there any update on income from BTP in 2022? Any update on that at all? Would be happy to have that provided as well. Telem, what is their current financial situation? What is their outlook for 2022? And can the government expect anything from Telem in 2022? One of the things that has been a part of the discussion is that when you have that 12.5% cut on employees, that surplus, if any, what happens to that? What is that situation with Telem? Is there anything coming back to the government of St. Martin? I would also like to ask the government of St. Martin, and particularly the Ministry of TIAT, would it be a possibility to also have particularly the entities of the airport and the harbor to make a sort of collective contribution to tourism marketing of St. Martin? So if they can each put aside, even if it's $500,000 guilders, and that can go towards our tourism budget, is that something that can be considered? And the shareholder can have that discussion with these entities to create, whether it's by a dividend, whether it's by a concession adjustment or an advance payment on concession, but get money for tourism marketing from these entities that benefit the most from tourism marketing. That's why I highlight specifically those two. I would also like to ask about Sabre Bank. Has there been any activity in 2022 from this company as far as the government is concerned? I saw an article earlier this year talking once again about possible oil exploration in this area. I would like to know if the government has an active board member, and if this board member has been sending any sort of reports back to the government of any activities going on at the Sabre Bank NV, and is the government abreast of any sort of oil exploration going on in that area, and what is the government's of St. Martin role in that, be it as government or via the Sabre Bank NV? Mr. Chairman, the minister mentioned the fuel assigns. I believe that we gave a relief a promised relief to the people of St. Martin in the form of a cut on that assigns. Can the minister remind the Parliament when does that expire, and is that 1 million increase as a result of the fact that this was a temporary measure, and that's why this was recalculated, so that we have actually 1 million more that we will collect than expected? Mr. Chairman, that would be all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Bryson. The next person on the list is MP Emmanuel. MP Emmanuel, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon to you, my honorable colleagues, the honorable minister and his support staff, and the people of St. Martin. Good afternoon to everyone. Mr. Speaker, I just have a few questions for the honorable minister. And it's concerning, and I know the minister probably in answering or returning, he'll say they're not part of his portfolio. Nonetheless, I know he will probably pass them on to the minister responsible. Mr. Chairman, through you to the honorable minister, I would like to know concerning the EHAS. Yeah, because I'm looking through the budget and I haven't seen nothing related to it. I could be wrong. Nonetheless, Mr. Chairman, I would like to know how much money has been collected entirety from the EHAS, and where exactly did the money go? And when I make mention in terms of where the money go, I know it was related also with the insurance company. So where did the money go? To the insurance company or to the coffers of the government? I would like to know through you, Mr. Speaker, to the honorable minister. And also, in an article, the government made mention that in collection of the EHAS, valuable data was collected. I would like to know through you to the honorable minister, can the Parliament of St. Martin be provided with the data, and exactly what did the data show and how is it helping the country of St. Martin? What is the data? What have been accumulated with this data? And also, Mr. Chairman, I would like to know concerning the EHAS, where we had a few employees saying that they were let go for whatever specific reasons. I would like to know, in totality, what has been the income or the salary during that period of time to all of the EHAS employees, whether they were down at the airport, whether it was whichever location it was at, how much was it? How much did it come up to concerning the whole entire payroll for the EHAS employees? And also, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to touch a little on Carnival. I think my colleagues have answered most of the questions, or have asked most of the questions concerning Carnival. And I know my colleague MP Westcott made mention to the government saying they're going to work something out. I would also like to know what's that worked out of a something that they are looking to do. And if there's something to work out, then what it is that is not functioning that needs working out. Because if you're saying we're going to work something out, then there's a problem. I would like to know, Mr. Chairman, through you to the honorable minister, where is that problem being derived from? Is it because the subsidy is not enough? Or is it that it's being mismanaged? Which one is it that needs to be worked out, Mr. Speaker, through the honorable minister? In addition to that, also I would like to know how much concerning all of the, how should I put it, festivities that we have on the island. So if you're talking about regatta and you're talking about all of these organizations that put on activities during the year that adds to our tourism calendar, our tourism portfolio, which one gets the least in terms of subsidy from government and which one gets the most in terms of subsidy from government, Mr. Chairman? And also, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move on quickly also to a few of the government-owned companies are not subsidized, but companies are related to the government, like the airport and the hospital. I know the In totality, right now, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Honorable Minister, what is the total sum of money given to the airport? Its totality, because I know just a couple of weeks ago they were given an extra 90 million. What in totality it is now, the amount of money that have been given to the airport for the reconstruction? For the reconstruction, we know 50 million was given by the World Bank and another 50 million was given by the European Bank. I mean, we are coming up to huge numbers. And at this present moment, nothing is moving at the airport. So I would like to know what is the total sum thus far given to the airport for the reconstruction. And also, yes, what happened to the 90 million that was given to them? And it also goes on to the other government-owned company, not the government-owned company, but also the hospital. Because we had the Honorable Minister of VSR saying that now they have a letter of intent. Mr. Chairman, I would like to know exactly what is this letter of intent and what does it entail? In my opinion, and not even in my opinion, this is something that, you know, I want to save it for the real part of the budget. So I would like to know, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the design of the hospital, are we getting less for more or more for less now with this letter of intent? And how much is that? Also, this is the part that really I am sort of taken aback. And I wish the Minister of Finance was here because I want to dialogue with him in terms of the facial expression concerning the central bank. Mr. Speaker, the central bank is engaging into a new currency for St. Martin and Curacao, which amounts to millions. I think it's 20 million, but I stand to be corrected on that number in terms of a new currency. I would like to know how much of that figure is part of St. Martin in terms of contributing to the new currency. Again, I'm not too sure, but in the article, I really believe it was 20 million it would cost. Maybe some of my colleagues or someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that, or the Minister of Finance, seeing that he's responsible for the central bank partly. I would like to know how much is St. Martin contributing towards that, and where is that money coming from? Where is that money coming from? Because it will be curious to want to figure out if it's coming from the 1% that is derived from the dollar here in St. Martin towards the Central Bank of Curacao. I don't know, so I'm asking. So in addition to that question, Mr. Chairman, I would like to know how much is generated annually from the 1% sent to the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin from St. Martin. Annually, how much is that? I would like to know. Also, Mr. Chairman, through you, how much or what is the value in terms of amount is the gold reserve bullion in the central bank from St. Martin? Our portion, how much is it? Mr. Speaker, to the Honorable Minister of Finance, I would like to know. Also, again, I would like to know in terms of percentage of the ownership of the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin, what is St. Martin's portion? What is St. Martin's portion? Because after all, Mr. Chairman, the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin has two bosses. Two. And the bosses, who are they? The Minister of Finance of Curacao and the Minister of Finance of St. Martin. They're the bosses. So it's direct questions to the Honorable Minister of Finance. How much is it that St. Martin contribute annually in terms of that 1% to the coffers of the central bank? In addition to that, also, Mr. Chairman, can the Honorable Minister of Finance give a detailed breakdown annually how St. Martin benefit from being in this union? I am an avid activist in terms of seceding from the central bank because I don't see the benefits for St. Martin, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's just to throw a few jabs now at my colleague when he make mention in terms of Carnival and not having the participants or the stakeholders walk out and then we don't have a good carnival. Mr. Chairman, I would like to know concerning yesterday, when the firefighters was in front of the government building, what would happen if they have to walk out and decide whenever a fire is happening, we walking out because we ain't taking part, we ain't going? What would happen if they have to go and remove bodies and our uniform, like they put down on the ground, is torn and mashed up and say, we ain't going because we have to use the same pair of uniform to go here, there, and everywhere because they don't have that. I would like to know what's the cost of equipment in terms of apparel for the firefighters. And where does that money come from? Because I could imagine if our firefighters decide we are not working anymore. We walking out. We walking out. I would like to know also, in terms of the equipment graveyard that is located up at the fire department, what is the value of the derelict? Because all that steel and machine and trucks and everything that is just put down there, that the equipment that are not working, has a value. I would like to know what's that value. And the second-hand trucks that they receive, that was bragged about that they receive equipment, what is the value of those materials, those equipment that they have right now? I would like an appraisal, if anything or any sort have ever been done concerning the equipment of the firefighters, Mr. Chairman. I would leave it at that, and I thank you very much. Time to go pick up my children.
Thank you, MP Emmanuel. The next person on the list is again MP Bryson. MP Bryson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I did want to add another two questions that I missed. One is when I was going over the government entities, I forgot to mention the Ontwikkelingsbank van de Nederlandse Antillen NV, of which we own 7%. That's the OBNA bank, I believe. We own 7% of this entity. What has it done in recent years for St. Martin? And can St. Martin consider, if there's not much tangible benefit to actually owning it, because whether we own it or not, they seem to sometimes invest in certain things or not. So the 7% stake, what are we getting from that? And if nothing, can the government consider relinquishing its 7% in exchange for one of the banking licenses that the OBNA possesses? They have, I believe, 3 banking licenses, and perhaps that would be a fair exchange to relinquish your 7% with that banking license that has a value. Either the government can use it to set up its own national bank, or it can be leased, it can be sold, I don't know. But that, I would imagine, has more of a value than just owning 7% on paper of an entity that I don't believe has ever contributed to our coffers. If not, then if I'm mistaken, that might be the case. And then I also just checked, and it's actually 100%. I thought it was less, but it's actually 100% the ownership of SLS, according to the budget. St. Martin Laboratory Services NV is owned 100% by the government. So I'm even more curious to understand what our role is in this entity. It's on page 113 of the budget. States St. Martin Laboratory Services NV 100%, and it says most recent financial statements 2019. So that does semi-answer my question, but then I want to know especially 2020 and 2021, which would have been record financial years for SLS. I would like those financials to be provided to Parliament. And then the other point, which my colleague mentioned and I forgot to ask about it, is related to indeed this EHAS. Mr. Chairman, as you know, I had foresaw exactly these questions that we're getting now coming to us, which is the fact that after years of a foreign entity collecting this insurance on our behalf, and that the tourists have been happily paying, instead of that coming to a local entity like the SZV or the government or even a local firm, which we could have done by changing it. I, of course, did have some challenges drafting that on my own, which is for that reason I then sent the legislation to the Minister of VSA, much like we did with the legislation on the banking, to have them, let's say, take it over and try to continue, because I still believe that there's an opportunity where even in Bonaire, which is a Dutch territory, has introduced a rival fee, which covers an insurance, it covers an environmental levy, so part of it goes to healthcare, part of it goes to the environment protection. I would like an update from the Minister of VSI of where he is with that legislation, because I think that's extremely valuable for us. We have about 500,000 tourists coming through there a year. You do the maths, that is a great income. And since we're going to be keeping this online portal to get the data from the people, then we might as well see if there's a possibility to have that fee present, let that go either to the coffers of government or an entity like the SZV, whatever methodology works best. But I just would like to see us do something with that and indeed collect some of those fees. And that was my last question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Bryson. Our next speaker, MP Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A good afternoon to the Honorable Minister and his support staff, to the griffier, to my honorable colleagues, and everybody else tuned in. Mr. Chairman, just a short question. Also in regards to the AHAS, seeing that we could have read in the media that the AHAS employers were not to be seen legally as employees from government, but that they were there based off a consultancy agreement. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, through you, I would like to request every single invoice and every single check that was paid off to all of these consultants then, from the inception up to, from the AHAS up to now. So all of the monies that was paid to them, how it was paid, I heard some of them received it through the bank, some used to get checks. Just an overview of that whole overhaul and all of the money that was spent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Peterson. The next Member of Parliament, MP De Weaver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you, Griffier, Minister, your team here, colleagues. Oh, sorry, good afternoon. Yes, sorry about that. Thank you for the correction. And to my colleagues here, just the back and forth about EHAS and certain comments I heard earlier on. Let me just clarify through you, Mr. Chairman. EHAS collection does not go to a foreign entity. It goes to companies that operate on St. Martin. So when EHAS was started, just to share a little bit of knowledge, let me just remind everyone that the country was in a emergency state with the rest of the world. And it was a proposal that all of the insurance companies on St. Martin collectively come together to provide a service for tourists coming in. That was what the discussion was. And at the same time, everyone had an option of doing a contribution to their community, of agreeing to certain terms that was the same for every insurance company that was operating on St. Martin. So if you think that, let's say I'm going to use an example, Guardian Group. If Guardian Group is a foreign entity, but they pay taxes here locally. So I'm going to look over there and say, explain to me if Guardian Group operating here on St. Martin or Nagico is a foreign company. So I just want to get that out there for clarity, because I don't want the public to be confused. Don't forget that what happened in the beginning of COVID, also the government was paying for every sick person, whether they were a St. Martiner or a foreigner. And then what you had to deal with was people going away from St. Martin, being shipped out from St. Martin and blaming this country for giving them COVID. So let's just, when we're talking about EHAS, go back to the beginning of it, of how we got into this situation where in order to open up our country, we had to make certain decisions. The decisions were done in a conversation in conjunction with the same islands that were doing the same thing in a legal manner, a very legal manner. So after saying all of that, Minister, maybe when you come back and enlighten us with VSI Minister coming into, as well as who's also sitting in as TAYAT Minister, you can clarify that for everybody, that this was a contribution done to basically alleviate the debt of government, who had to pay anyways for people that didn't even live on this country. So let me just make sure I say that over. The country of St. Martin, the government of St. Martin was responsible for paying for foreigners who contracted COVID while on island. Just remember that, okay? That's all I wanted to clarify. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that clarification, MP De Weaver. And I look at the list again and I see MP Bryson wants the floor. MP Bryson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the good thing about working on legislation is you have to do a whole lot of research. You get information, documentation from the government. You can request contracts, you can request information. And in this information, Mr. Chairman, contrary to what was said, the entity that is collecting the insurance money, there's no money that EHAS collects. There is no EHAS fee. There's just an insurance that was established. That company is a company in Curacao. So my question to the Minister of Finance, if this is a local company, do you get 5% TOT on each of those $15? Can the Minister please clarify that? I have all of the contracts right here, Mr. Chairman. And like I said, nobody is saying that what was done then was wrong. After a year that it was started is when I said, okay, it's time to transition from what was being done to something more permanent, which is why a health levy initiative was drafted. And then it has now evolved. I believe the minister gave an update to say, okay, we will make this a tourism levy so that we have had it before. The funds were not coming to St. Martin, but now we're finding a way to have those funds come to St. Martin. So again, if anybody wants the information, if it's one thing Rolando Bryson is good at is the research, and I have it all here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I see MP DeWeaver wants the floor.
I'm so happy that we're doing research, and I looked to my colleague here to the left and said, you know what? And through you, Mr. Chair, my neighbor here next to me, he's come up with amazing ideas of how this country can actually increase their revenue generation, which I will wholeheartedly support in a responsible manner. But what you cannot keep doing is basically confusing the truth, because the insurance companies here get a share of what is collected. So in your research, make sure it is complete. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Bryson. We've had a new approach in our Central Committee meetings, and it has been what it was. MP DeWeaver, you asked for the floor? No? Oh, okay, no, the griffier is creating problems now. Since there are no further questions and remarks and clarifications, members, please, you will have your happy hour coming up just now. I want to thank you, members of Parliament, and I look at the Minister. Minister, I'm sure you would need some time. The minister has indicated that he will make all attempts to be back for Monday, and so did his SG indicate as well. So I want to thank the minister, and I want to thank members of Parliament.
A point of order, Mr. Chairman, but I only asked like 8 questions. Why does the minister need all the way till Monday?
Because he's a super minister.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's get it real until we adjourn this meeting. The meeting is adjourned until Monday. I see the effect pink is having on everybody. Good thing pink is only once a year in my favorite month, the month of October. I hereby adjourn this meeting until Monday.